morning, St. Francis. Good morning, people of God. It is Thursday, the 28th day of August, 2025. Thursday of the 21st week of the year, the 21st week in Ordinary Time. It is also the memorial of St. Augustine. Again, Monica, his mother, comes first on the 27th, and then Augustine follows her on the 28th. It is also my half birthday, so happy half birthday to me. But Augustine, again, somebody who I have real issues with all the time because, again, his mother's nagging or whatever it is, or her prayers or her cries or whatever it is, unfortunately caused him to embrace a little bit too much guilt and a really bad sense of himself before he decides to enter the Christian community. Sometimes, again, too many times in the Christian community, we can take a look at the movement into the faith as the ending of one life and the beginning of another. But that's not necessarily how human life is. We don't forget about how we lived before. Yes, there is a dying and there is a rising, and it's a dying and rising to those things, again, that stand in the way of the fullness of what we are. But that the life that we lived before has a blessing in it, because it's the life that we lived before that drew us to God to begin with. So we carry that with us. Hopefully we get rid of those things, again, that stand, in the way of us, being able to be happy and to find a life that is fulfilling. With Augustine, he didn't seem to understand that part of it. He also got involved with a couple of weird kinds of groups that were kind of talking about the power of the soul fights against the body, and the body is evil, and you have to kind of get rid of the body to free the soul, and that's just crazy talk in some ways. But this was all running amok at Augustine's time, because again, people aren't really thinking through fully yet, or they're in the process of doing it, of just what it means for Jesus to have become flesh and become one like us, and to share our life, and then show us a different way of being and living in this world. And so, Augustine's whole prior life, he sees as a great evil when it wasn't. Again, yes, he had a woman that he did not marry but had a child with, and so was she a mistress? Again, did he love her? It's never very clear, but he has to get rid of her, and then he gets rid of his kid. It's like and embraces a clerical state, and that's not good at all. And so and that leads then into this whole ridiculous ideas about sin that continues to plague us today, and the whole pushing of original sin, which kind of even mutes original goodness. He focuses so much upon humanity's failings that somehow it's hard to see where God has rescued us from all of that and changed everything again and again and again. So there's wisdom in everything in some things that he did, and there's not in other things that he did. One of the greatest things, perhaps, to think about, again, when he had a more lucid moment when it came to sin, was the understanding of why is it that we sin? Why is it that we are tempted? Why is it that we fail? And for Augustine, it was at this point that we might come to better know ourselves, which is a very important way of looking at those episodes in our lives. They are not an evil at work in us. They are ways that help us to know ourselves better so that we can move forward into the life, that God has planned for us and prepared for us. So with that in mind, again, we take a look at the Thessalonians as we continue this letter that Paul has written to them. Paul desiring to be able to be with them, and I think that something is standing in the way of him being able to do that. And so he prays that God will bring him to them to be able to teach more about what it means to live the life of the gospel. And in the meantime, he encourages them to love and to keep loving and to never stop loving, because that, again, the hallmark of what it means to be a person who has received the gospel is just that, is to love and to continue to love, and not to use love as some kind of pretext, to bring hurt and pain upon people, but to love, to bring understanding, to bring hope, to bring joy, and especially in those times and places where it seems to be lacking. To be people who do that, Paul encourages the Thessalonians to continue that kind of work in their lives, and to let that work flourish until Paul comes to them again to be able to bring them more of this good news. In Matthew's gospel, we're no longer yelling at the scribes and Pharisees, but now Jesus talks about having to be on guard, meaning to keep vigil, to be awaiting Christ's return. This is where now we move into this whole idea of Jesus foreshadowing and forecasting the fact that even though it will seem as though he has died and everything else, that he will return. And in that return, we need to prepare ourselves and not basically be people who loaf off or lays off become lazy or whatever it is, but to be people who are constantly at work, again, doing those things that Paul writes to the Thessalonians we have to do, to continue to love. Because out of that love comes a multitude of wonder and beauty. The persistence of love gives life and creates more and more life, and asks and calls us to remember again and again who we are and to who it is that we belong. Again, if in the parable that he gives, we see that the master is delayed in returning, we see that Christ is delayed in returning, and we mistreat each other, especially in the name of the master, then we are doing a terrible evil. And again, in that way, there is a punishment for that, and a punishment that is of our own making, because again, we forgot who we are, and we forgot what we are supposed to do and how we are supposed to be as we await Christ's return, and we await the fulfillment of all God's promises. A blessed day, St. Francis and people of God. May the Lord give you his peace.